a little distracted. Sorry about that. Tell us about what that means.
So in a nutshell, what it means is essentially I am responsible for the implementation of public policy that is formulated by a 5-member elected board. Effectively, the county government functions to carry out that public policy as the elected body determines the respective direction for the community. We do that in a number of different ways. The county consists of a couple of thousand employees, in addition to about 27 different departments that range and vary from everything from economic development to public health to social services to library services. We have a sheriff operations, and then there are a lot of internal functions like information technology and tax department. And so there's a whole host of functions, analities, and services. The register of deeds, which is essentially responsible for the recordation of all of our land and property. So that list goes on. But in a nutshell, a big part of my job is making sure, one, that the policy is implemented from day to day, and just as importantly, that the operational aspects of county government are in fact carry on. And so my job is essentially to oversee that.
And I also understand you're a faculty at NCCU?
Adjunct faculty at NCCU, yes.
Excellent. And a couple other hats you wear too, right?
What do you mean?
I mean, like you have other things to do besides being the county manager and an adjunct faculty. There are other things you do as well.
Well, I sit on several boards, that do, civic work in the community, like, for example, the United Way Board of Directors for the Greater Triangle, UDI, which is essentially a local community development corporation that obviously deals with how we, in fact, create economic opportunities for some of our more challenged and lower wealth communities, and not just economic opportunities, but housing and things of that nature as well. So, I sit on those boards, and oftentimes the liaison for the Board of Commissioners on various issues and committees and things of that nature. So, I guess you could say I do wear several other hats.
Absolutely, quite busy. So I want to ask you a question. I've been debating whether to get started on this first, but as I've talked to my husband, he always says probably get the worst part of it out first. What did you think of when you saw Mr. Floyd underneath that police officer's knee?
Well, the first thing that came to mind to me when I watched it, it was just essentially a modern day lynching. The thing that I guess went to the core of me was the fact that here was another human being who was effectively staring directly into the camera with his hands in his pockets in such a callous fashion as he took the life of another human being. And to me, that just went to the core of me as, a human. And then when you obviously add other factors, it was just very daunting. It was very telling in respect to, the attitude that was pervaded outwardly when I saw that.
But I assume in your role and some of the other things that you do, this is not unusual or unique, right? That this has happened many, many, many times before. Was your feeling about what happened to Mr. Floyd different than any other police killings of black men and of black people?
So here is where I have to come down on a question like that, Rochelle. Obviously, being in the public service arena,
Yeah.
I work with law enforcement folks. I know a good many of the law enforcement folks. The Durham County Sheriff and I work together, and if someone was to ask me if we were friends, I'd tell you absolutely.
Yeah.
I know a lot of great police officers.
Yeah.
But I also know that, unfortunately, we have, like our society, bad actors in every facet of life. And unfortunately, that's what we were confronted with Derek Chauvin. And he's a bad actor. And unfortunately, we are seeing too much of that, those bad actors that's effectively infiltrated a number of our police departments around the country.
Yeah.
But what I will say, just as a capstone to all of that is, these departments, just like our hospitals, just like our corporate spaces, just like our educational spaces, all of these places and spaces are a reflection of our society, and you have bad actors everywhere.
Yeah. So I absolutely don't want to put you in a bad spot about this, but my husband is a member of a fraternity called Omega Psi Phi, and he has several fraternity brothers who are either sheriffs or police officers or were sheriffs and police officers. And I've talked to several of them over the last week or two about this. And almost every one of them have said to me almost the exact same thing, is training. Like, you have to have the proper training, and you have to have some direction from your leadership to say, this is not something we're going to do. We're going to de-escalate the problem. We're not going to escalate the problem. You think that's correct too? Or do you think that there's something else that's missing or something that's not there?
I think it's a combination of training and common sense. Okay. Training is extremely important. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you see a young man who is asleep in his vehicle, and you go and you awaken him and you have a half-hour conversation with him, and you determine that he's inebriated and he has offered an opportunity to walk home, then one of two things could have essentially happened. That young man could have been given the opportunity to walk home. He could have been given the opportunity to have someone come and pick him up. But things escalated to the point that he ended up losing his life by taking 2 bullets in the back. Now, when I talk about common sense, the reality of it is this. You have a young man who's running away with a non-lethal weapon, and he takes 2 bullets in his back that kills him. And so then the question becomes, how much common sense was exercised in that? If you look at Derek Chauvin, and you have a young man here where we have seen other instances of people being choked out on the street by police officers, on video. And you hear gentlemen say, I can't breathe. Common sense prevailing, would your humanity not say, I need to either turn him over, I need to get him upright, get him something to drink. He's in cuffs. He represents no threat.
Yeah.
Common sense prevailing, I don't think that, those kinds of things would in fact happen. And then, of course, there are other factors. You saw, as well as I did, the article that came out just yesterday about some Wilmington police officers who talked about slaughtering Black people.
Yeah.
So there's a third factor, and the third factor on top of training and common sense, I suspect, is recruitment in terms of understanding who is working in these departments. If you have people who have that level of vitriolic hate for another race of people, they have no business doing this kind of work in the public arena.
Right.
And so those are the three things that I would say.
Yeah. And one of the things I asked him about that was like, before you become a police officer, is there any psychological or mental health training or evaluations that happen before someone is hired as a police officer, so that people can catch these little hints that this may be in that person's makeup?
You're asking, is there
Yes.
that type of assessment?
Yes.
I came through undergraduate school in the early 1980s. I had a lot of friends who went on to work for police departments, for the FBI, for the Secret Service. And back then, it was a rather rigorous process that all of those guys would go through in order to be accepted into those respective academies. I don't know personally where the breakdown has in fact occurred in that respect, in terms of whether or not they are doing those kinds of assessments. It would surprise me if those kinds of assessments were not going on. However, with the number of bad actors that we see making it through, effectively what it means, in my opinion, is that we perhaps need to be looking at different kinds of and more intrusive kinds of assessment tools to make sure that these public entities who are going to do this, these people who are coming into the public entities to do this important work, are in fact weeded out.
Yeah. And what's really, I was talking to someone today who's very passionate about this, and she said to me, like, we have to give everybody a chance. We have to be fair. We have to give everybody a chance. But like the article from Wilmington, I mean, how do you give that person a chance? I mean, how do you give someone a chance who hates you simply because of the color of your skin, the thickness of your lips or hips or whatever it is? Things that you literally have no control over whatsoever.
I have a bias, and so I will. I won't answer that question.
Okay, I accept that as so. But for me, it's hard to understand how white people specifically are uncertain of how we've come to this point where we are today. Like, it's like they just read the newspaper this morning and saw that Mr. Floyd is dead, and this is shocking that this is some unique or aberrant behavior. This is not something that's been happening for years and years and years. I find that very hard to process. When white people call me and ask me, what do you need me to do? What should I do? And sometimes I just ask, what have you done to date? What are you doing now? Well, I'm reading, I'm checking with my family. We're talking about it. And I said, do you think that's going to bring a resolution to this issue? And they all think so. We keep talking about it. Eventually there will be a fix. But then you have Wilmington and white supremacists all over the place. I think there were 2 black men. I think one of them was in California, and I can't remember the other state. The other one that was hung. And I just can't believe that a black person would hang him or herself. I just cannot see that. Do you?
Again,
You can't.
I don't. I don't. Obviously, none of us have all of the answers, and none of us know, what the circumstances are around many of these issues. However, what I will say is that these are, in fact, unsettling times.
They are.
And everybody is, quite frankly, on edge.
Right.
It is my hope that cooler heads can ultimately prevail, and we can think through matters of policy and administration in terms of how we try to govern in this space, how we conduct ourselves in the business and corporate space, and in education as well, in order to bring the type of awareness that is necessary. And if we are going to change this dynamic, there are a lot of people who go to work every day. They go back to their middle-class suburban lifestyle. They go to their grocery stores on Saturday morning. There's fresh fruits and vegetables, and everything is wholesome, and they get what they need. And they can retreat back to their middle-class suburban location, and then they may catch a movie or a show or play around the golf or whatever it is that they do in their respective way of life. And it becomes so commonplace oftentimes that the whole notion of living in a community where there are children who go without food over the weekend
Right.
is unfathomable.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And so people live in bubbles oftentimes, which is what creates the lack of awareness. If I don't hear gunshots at night, then my assumption is the only time that I should ever hear that is when I go to a gun range.
Right.
But if I'm a kid who lives in a tough neighborhood that can't play on the porch after, 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the evenings or outside because I'm hearing gunshots all night, then, that's an exceptionally different world. The thing that's been a little bit impressive to me is how some, not all, but certainly some of these corporations have taken it upon themselves to try and do a better job at creating this racial and social awareness that is necessary in order for us to become, sort of cognizant about the various things that are important to our society and to our humanity.
Yeah.
Procter & Gamble tends to come to mind just based on some of the things that I've seen them do as recent as this week.
Right.
To create, a certain level of cultural and racial awareness. But it's going to take, a lot more than commercials. There is a clear and present danger, and the clear and present danger, I think, is as a result of the absolute lack of awareness in our communities across the board about, how other people live.
Yeah.
If I don't say this in a flippant way, but if you get up on Saturday morning and you got a nice truck and a hitch and a boat, you hook up to it, and you're gonna take it down to the coast, and you're gonna go out on the ocean, and you're gonna deep sea fish, and that's great and dandy. But for a kid who might live in East Durham, he may not know that there's an ocean, and even if he knows or she knows anything about fishing, the closest that they might ever get to it may be in a little creek that runs behind their house, and you're sitting on a bucket with a cane pole. I took that analogy from one that a comedian made several years back. But again, it's just different people, different worlds, and I think class and socioeconomic status, wealth, those are the factors that dictate, where one's respective station is in life. And the biggest challenge I think that we have is trying to figure out again, this wealth gap
Yeah.
and how it can get closed and create better opportunities for more people to participate.
Yeah. And I think, one of the people I spoke to today was a white man. I asked him, had he ever had any fear if a police siren came up behind him, if he saw the blue lights? And he said, no, only for the fact of whether I was going to get a ticket and how much the ticket was going to cost. And I told him, I said, so I have a 21-year-old son and a 41-year-old daughter. And each time they leave the house, I start praying. I pray till they get to their destination, and I pray till they come back into the driveway. And he said, why do you do that? And I said, because I'm not so sure my child will make it home simply because of the color of his skin or his height. My son's very tall and thin. Maybe that could be intimidating because, you have someone like Trayvon Martin walking home through his neighborhood, eating a pack of
With a
Skittles.
bag of Skittles.
Right. And he's dead, and he had a hoodie. And my son wears a hoodie winter, spring, summer, and fall. He loves hoodies. I don't know what it is about hoodies, but he feels comfortable when he has a hoodie, and people seem to think that's a strange thought for me to do, to pray for my children when they leave and come back home. But,
Well, it goes back to the heart of what I just said about awareness and privilege. When you have privilege and you've always enjoyed privilege, you never have to think about those things. I've got a 25-year-old son, and, right now he lives in Charlotte, but, he comes home.
Yeah.
And even though Charlotte's a 2-hour drive away, he's got to text us when he gets home or call or say something to just let us know he made it safely.
Yep.
I've got a 30-year-old daughter who lives in Tampa, and most of the times when she is here, she will fly home. But there has been times that she's driven too, and I won't allow her to drive from Tampa to North Carolina by herself.
Right.
And because I just don't think, even being a Black female, that it is in fact safe. And so as a parent, those are fears that, as a Black parent, those are fears that we all live with. And I'll take it a step further. As a Black man, I'm a county manager in Durham. I wouldn't say that everyone knows who I am, but a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been here in local government for 20 years now.
Yeah.
And I have had experiences with the police pulling me over while I'm taking my son to middle school in the morning, and I'm the deputy county manager.
Right.
And he pulls in behind me. He stops me. My tags wasn't expired. I wasn't driving erratic or anything. I was simply taking my child to school in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And he pulls me over, and he had run my plate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when he ran my plate, he comes up to my car and he says to me that I don't have insurance on my car. And I say, officer, I said, I have insurance on my car. I said, we just switched insurance companies from, Geico to Allstate or what have you, but my tag wasn't expired, so I was trying to understand why he stopped me.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, I said, we switched over about a month or so ago, and there's a form called an FN1 or something like that, that once you switch companies, one company's supposed to release that form to the other company. Well, that didn't happen because the company that we left, I guess they were taking their sweet time doing that. But long story short, the officer went as far as saying to me that, I didn't have insurance on my car. He could have my car impounded right here on the spot. Mm-hmm. Look, you know me from Adam's House Cat. Now, I had my son, who was a middle school at the time, in the back seat with me. I'm not going to sit here and argue with this guy.
Right.
Lo and behold, one of my undergraduate school buddies drove by, who was a police officer. He saw me and my son sitting over there, He turns around and U-turn in the middle of the street and comes back. He goes up to the young white officer, and I don't know what he says to say it to him to this day, and I never ask him.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and my buddy, you know, he and I, we see each other, you know, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we'll see each other tomorrow. And to this day, I've never asked him what he said to that officer. But whatever he said, all that officer did was he came up to my car, he handed my driver's license back, and he said, "Have a nice day." Yeah. And that was the extent of it.
And that's the luck, so, the draw, right?
And so, yeah, it just happened. It happened to be the time of the morning that my buddy was headed down to the substation that he was based out of.
Right.
But that situation could have turned out, you know, very different. I mean, he could have set my son and I out, although he didn't have any proof other than what was coming up on his mobile data terminal, that I didn't have insurance on my car. But what he had on his mobile data terminal was inaccurate information because we had insurance.
Right.
And the new cards had not come in the mail. But the whole notion of profiling me, because I was a black guy driving a halfway decent car, was the only reason that he could have potentially stopped me, because I wasn't driving erratic. Right. My tags weren't expired on my car or anything. But the point I'm making is, you know, as an African-American male, and even having a high-profile job here in Durham, mm-hmm. you know, and having had a high-profile job in Durham for the last 20 years, uh-huh. the same fears I have for my son, I have as a black man.
Yeah. I mean, we all do. We all have those fears. I mean, I think very few black parents feel comfortable letting their children meander through the world without some notion. So I have on my iPhone, I have Find My Friends. So I know where my children are at all times. I know where my husband is at all times, because I just want to be able to respond as I need to. And I record those locations so that in case something does happen, he's there. But I want to share something with you. You know, I'm a technologist. I worked in technology for about 45 years now. So I've been here for a long time. In the last 5 or 6 years, technology has taken a dramatic turn. So we have the Internet of Things. You can call your refrigerator and ask, is there eggs in it? You know, you can, on your computer, you can tell that you want to order something from Amazon, or you want to get into a building that's secure. You use biometric, you have to have fingerprint or an eye scan, you know. I mean, all these technologies. And so, at the time I was doing a project at Duke, it was called Bass Connection. We were doing a project and we were looking at how cyber attacks hurt people. And so the person who was leading it was Governor Sarah Raskin, who was governor of the Maryland Federal Reserve. And she was also the deputy secretary under Obama, under President Obama. And one of the things that we did is we looked at the Equifax breach. And Equifax sent everyone, so none of us are customers of Equifax, but whatever. Equifax sent out emails or something to everybody who had been breached, and asked them, do you want, you know, monitoring? What do you want us to do? You know, we'll give you some money, whatever it is that we're going to do. And the survey that we did, I think was something like 10 or 11,000. I'm not exactly sure what it is. Out of that, of the black people, less than 3% of black people responded to that because they didn't know what it was. And as these new emerging technologies are coming on board, black people are going to be more disadvantaged. My husband is a third grade teacher, and there's something on the bottom of his signature every day that you cannot take a picture, or you cannot, you know, capture an image of a child without that parent's permission. Well, don't take that child to Target then, or Walmart, or anywhere else, because that child's going to be captured an image. And these technologies that are coming, the one that I found the most, I guess, offensive of all of this is when Google first attempted facial recognition software, whenever they encountered someone that was not white, they put up a picture of a gorilla. And of course, you know, I think Google did not do that intentionally. I don't think that was their intent. But that's what happens when everybody in the room looks just like you. You know, so if they don't have any black or brown people working in their organizations, you're going to get technologies that are going to be very harmful for Black and brown people.
Okay. Yes.
And
I get that.
Yep. And I think finally.
And you know, the interesting thing about it is, you know, just big data in general. We have to be extremely careful about these algorithms and big data and things of that nature, just by virtue of the fact that it has a tendency to stereotype and throw races, socioeconomic classes of people all within the same bucket. Now, I'll give you an example. You know, we use big data and these algorithmic approaches on a number of different occasions. Banks use it. There are a lot of other entities that use it as well. But if you say, okay, we've got X number of census tracts in this particular zip code, and each of those census tracts consist of people who have credit scores that are lower than 700 or 500.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are potentially some people inside those census tracts who also have 750 and 800 credit scores. But by virtue of the fact that you are using this algorithm that says if you're within that given census tract, you know, you get discriminated against by virtue of what the big data and the algorithm is telling you, just by virtue of where you live.
Right.
And so, I mean, you're right. All of those things have proven. In fact, I've got an article around somewhere. I'll have to see if I can find it. But there was one researcher, I want to say she was up at one of the Ivy League schools, but she did an extensive piece of work on, you know, how racist big data systems were.
Absolutely.
And, you know, she pointed out a number of those sort of factors.
Yeah, I've written articles about it too. I mean, simply by your zip code, your insurance, the cost of insurance or the cost of whatever service is in there goes up more if you're in a high-risk zip code. Or, for example, when you were talking about your police stop, so now the technology is all police cars, at least in most major cities, they scan your license plate as you're driving by. And so they're trying to capture that information about who you are and what you are. And so for people of color, we're in harm's way all the time. And I'm writing a book right now about emerging technologies. And I always tell people, you know, the people who are most likely to be hurt by this are the people who are not familiar with emerging technologies and the properties that are applied to them. And the people who develop these technologies, such as algorithm, automation, machine learning, you know, data brokers and all these different people, mostly are white male. So they don't even know how to consider what the issue is for a Black man living or a Black woman living in McDougal Terrace or something like that. So the algorithm is meant for the majority, not the minority. And if it hurts the minority, it's of no consequence, because the key they're trying to get at is data that they can use to either sell or something to help some other company get ahead, such as what we have with Facebook and the current president, you know? I mean, and I tell people all the time, anything is free is not free. If you got Google, Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo, they're capturing data about you. If you're on social media, every time you post something, they're capturing it and dissecting that information, dissecting it, and then deciding who to sell it to, you know? And we, as Black and brown people, need to understand that completely. We need to understand that this is what is in our future, and it's coming quick. You know, if you go into Sam's Club, you know, you can go through there, you can use your phone to scan your items and walk out the front door. As long as they scan your barcode or your QR code, you're good to go. You ain't got to never interact with people. When that becomes the rule of the day, people who have those low wage or low skilled positions are going to be in harm's way. in one way or the other. So I was just my soap opera. Sorry about that. But that is what I do. That's what I do for a living. But, you know, for me, I think that, you know, people like you are very important to our society because it shows an example of a Black man who's doing the right thing. I think the same thing for my husband. You know, I mean, it's important to see Black men who are good fathers, that are good people, who are actually being productive citizens, who are making the world better the way that they can. I just wish the world would see them as they are, as opposed to seeing them as a threat or something else. You know, my husband is tall, my son's tall, you know, I mean, and just that could be a problem. I had a chat with a lady in my neighborhood, and she says she's afraid when she sees tall, dark Black men. And I asked her, why? She says, because they're known to commit crimes. I'm like, you mean there are no tall white men that commit crimes? And she didn't know how to answer that. So we stopped talking. So I just kept on walking. So
I wonder, that's an interesting take. But you know, I studied much like yourself in 4 different fields, and was degreed in those areas. And so, as a student of sociology, we used to look at characteristics of social deviance.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, in sort of understanding those various characteristics, it created these stereotypical type classes of people who, you know, some sociologists decided to study that suggested that this was the makeup, the criteria. These were the X factors. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at, and I know that you have seen this, the 13th Amendment, just as a case in point, but when you look at what constitutes criminalization, all right, the fact of the matter is there are people, and I have not done this research, but there are people who don't look like you or I that have, you know, committed grave atrocities,
Right.
Who has essentially received pops on the hand, if they got popped any at all. I mean, if you think about the Dred Scott decision, all right, and you say, okay, if Dred Scott basically, I mean, if the determination was effectively what rights does a Black man have that a white man has to respect, then you can further understand how a Black man in 2020 in American society can jog down the street in his own neighborhood and be hunted, shot, killed on video, and no one is arrested and no one goes to jail until that social contract is broken. And the public gets to see firsthand how this young man was trapped and hunted. And now, all of a sudden, an awakening occurs. But, you know, we know throughout our 400-year history in this country that those kinds of things have, yes, in fact, happened, not all on camera.
Right.
And we didn't have the luxury of witnessing how and what transpired. But, you know, you think about public lynchings, you think about someone like an Emmett Till, who, as of recent, the lady who said that she lied about him having whistled at her, you know, those things weren't criminalized.
Right.
In a way that other people effectively had to pay a price for. And yet a young man died for supposedly whistling.
Yeah.
A young man died for supposedly walking through a house under construction and not taking anything, but I suspect that you did. So he had to lose his life. A young man ran away in a parking lot and took 2 bullets in the back. Walter Scott, in Charleston, South Carolina, jumped out of his car and he was running away from a police officer because he had an expired tag, but he also, owed child support.
Yeah.
And then, he gets shot in the back running away.
Yeah.
And when they walk up on him after he falls on the ground, they throw, it was either a handgun or a taser down beside him, as if they were attempting to plant evidence.
Right.
So we know, that these kinds of things have historically happened. But again, the criminalization of certain acts for certain classes and certain races of people in American society has always been a challenge.
Yeah. But, I think in parallel to what you just said, so Dylan Roof went into a church with people. He prayed with those people. He was in there praying with the people, and then he shot him. And I think he got 12 life sentences or something like that. That was a black person. He'd been on death row before he got out the church. And so, I asked Judge Webster this the other day. Is justice blind as it's portrayed? She has her eyes covered and she has a scale that's almost balanced. Is justice blind? And the way he answered that was really profound to me because, it's supposed to be, but it's not always, it's not always that way. And we have about 3 or 4 minutes. I want to say one thing and then I'll leave the rest of the time for you to say whatever you want to say. But I tell white people this: imagine a world with a box of white crayons and the only crayons in the boxes are white. What kind of world would you have? And if you think that's a good world to have, I think you probably fall very short of having a happy life if the only crayons in that box are white. There's a reason why there are however many color crayons that they are, because it's necessary diversity for the world to be better. Now, anything else you wish to say? All yours.
No, I'll just state the obvious, and that is, look, we were concerned 40 years ago in American society about America becoming a melting pot. Our world is a melting pot.
Yep.
And when you look at just the U.S. borders alone, and this little 300 and some odd million people that we have here in this country, we make up only 5% of the world's population. Everybody else is brown and black and yellow, and they come in all different hues.
Yep.
And the reality, it is essentially this. We have to, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, develop more of a social, a global, ethnic awareness of the world that we live in. It bothers me when I have walked into certain places and spaces, and I've seen my Latino brothers and sisters in, a shopping center or some, setting, and I see Americans say to them, speak English. And then I have traveled abroad and gone to a number of countries, not even very far, island nations right off the coast of the U.S. And I see little children of color who can speak 2 and 3 different languages very fluently.
Right.
Okay? They are as worldly as one can imagine in terms of understanding what's happening in politics around the globe. But we're the ones who are effectively yelling, speak English.
Right.
And all we know is English. Right. So then the question I would ask is, if you want to look at others as being insufficient or ignorant, as some Americans would hold them. You really have to sort of do some deep introspection as an American citizen and look in the mirror and say, who's the one that falls short here? I mean, I've got friends who come from the Middle East and friends from certain parts of Africa, and friends who were from, Somalia that ended up in Europe, as a result of, wars. And, they were refugees and these things. But, the interesting thing about it, despite their respective travels in life, many of them, they are fluent in so many different languages, and they are fluent in so many different cultures. It's mind-boggling. They are citizens of the world,
right?
And we oftentimes will have the audacity to look down on them just by virtue of the fact that they may have been born in a developing or a third world country. And I think, the challenge for our humanity is to get beyond that and recognize that we all came here the same way. We are all going to leave here the same way.
Right.
And in the end, as we came with nothing, we will leave with nothing. And, the key is to appreciate that diversity, to celebrate that diversity and understand that as communities, as states, as nations, that is what makes us as strong as we can be.
Amen. Amen. Couldn't have said it better myself. I agree with you completely. The more you know, the better off you are.
Absolutely. Yep. Knowledge is power.
Amen. Thank you very much, Wendell. I'm going to trim out that phone ringing. I don't know where it was coming from. And once I do that, I'll send you the video, but I probably won't do that until tomorrow. And then if you like it, we'll upload it. If not, we can do over or something else.
So what do you upload it to?
YouTube. I sent you the link to my YouTube channel. It's about 50.
Oh, okay. I didn't get a chance to look at it. Look, I've been on, I do so many calls during the course of the week. The last thing I want to do is have a phone conversation or a Zoom meeting. So I didn't look at it, but at any rate, hopefully you got what you need.
I did, and I appreciate it very much, but I want you to see it before I upload. I always request permission to upload it before I upload it, just to make sure there are no legal issues or anything else that's wrong. Or you may, so one of the judges I had a chat with, I think it was Monday. I told him I was not even willing to upload his chat, so he wants a do-over, but I want people to hear what they've said. If I've said anything or we say anything that may cost them any harm, I try to make sure we don't upload that video. We do it over, or we do it whatever we need to do to make sure the person is protected.
Okay. All right. I'll look at it.
All right, dear. To stay safe, and thank you for all the help. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Stay safe.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.